he says some things about Ptolemy, and finally he asks on page 205, what is it you want from me? Okay? And they go on and talk. And she says, I want to know why you take on that form. And he says, he goes on and says, page 206, in all the centuries, my burden, not one single magician has been interested enough even to ask about the skies. Why should they? I'm a demon, etc., etc. Okay? So they continue talking, and on 209, okay, because Bartimaeus keeps trying to shrug off the point that Kitty never quite gets around to. That is, she never comes out, explicitly says what's on her mind. And on 209, he's talking just about, typical human-demon relations, and says, I'll go as far as to say your particular madness, Kitty, is less harmful than most, but it will lead to your death and to mine also. So I'll be frank with you. What you have just suggested is ridiculous. And what she suggested is that the demons and the humans, the demons and the commoners become allies to overthrow the magicians and to kind of break the cycle. He says that's utterly ludicrous. He says, so let me give you two reasons why. One, no Jinni, Afrit, etc., will ever team up with any kind of human. Okay? He says, we've suffered too much for us ever to view a human as an ally. That's a lie. What about Ptolemy? He was unique. Okay? Don't bring him into this. She says, but he disproves everything you've just said. Now, she's not totally aware yet of his total history with Ptolemy, which we are going to see, okay, before we get to the end of the novel. Okay? So, he keeps going on, and he says, while you've been talking, I've been showing good manners, etc., but I've been watching you like a hawk. You step one toe, you put one finger outside that circle, and I'm going to be on you. Okay? He says, even, page 210, even if 100 other jinn, almost as potent as me, shared the sentiment, wanted nothing better than to cast their lot in with some oat-brained humans, we couldn't. Why? What must happen for us to get here? They have to be summoned, which means we're put in chains, metaphorical chains. We are bound, we have no free will. So even if we wanted to, we couldn't. That is, our wanting to would be enforced. That's not free will. Okay? He says, okay, so what's the alternative? Every summons binds us. That's what they do. Would you be happy to give us control? Kitty, sure, yeah, that's what it takes. He says, come on, not in a million years. Okay? Okay, let's prove it. Give me power for a moment, he says, top of 211. Come on. Put your money where your mouth is. Step outside that circle. Come on. As she pauses. Well, you've just told me. You'd fall upon me faster than blinking. Don't worry about old Bartimaeus. I was just kidding. I was just, spouting smoke there. Come on. Show me. What's he saying to show? Show me your trust. You're talking about trust. You talk a great game, Kitty. Prove it. Okay? But she says, no, that won't achieve anything. Bottom of 212. Okay? Because at the top, before I get to the bottom of 212, the top of 212, she says, no, you wouldn't fall on me. You'd just dematerialize. You'd go back. And he says, I'd have no time for fantasies, Kitty. Listen to yourself. You don't believe a word you're saying. Dismiss me. And she gets all angry at this, bottom of 212. So, that stupid Egyptian boy was good enough for you, was he? You put your faith in him happily enough. Why not me? What did he do for you that I couldn't? Because she doesn't know yet what Ptolemy did. She doesn't know anything about Ptolemy's gate. Okay? He says, well, for one thing, he followed me to the other place. If that's... She was going to say impossible. He says it's not impossible. It's just not done. I don't believe it. You don't have to. He did. And he tells us what happened. Ptolemy did. I challenged him to prove his trust in me too. That was the way he did it, by devising the gate of Ptolemy. He went through the 4 elements to find me. And he paid the price as he guessed he would. Four elements: earth, air, fire, water. What does it mean? He goes through those. It means he unmakes himself. These are ancient, thought. These are the 4 things that constitute matter. By going through these, he becomes none of these. And what is Ptolemy, his soul, his spirit, whatever, goes on. Okay? And he says, and he paid for that. There was no limit to our bond. Okay? But for you, well, you've got good intentions. He says, I wouldn't ask it of anyone else, not even you. Okay? So, she says, I'll do it. I'll figure out how. Oh, you know ancient Greek? She'll figure out how. Okay? Chapter 16. John's thinking, I'm screwed. Bartimaeus lied to me. Kitty's still alive. Prime Minister's out for me. And he has this wild idea for some reason. He thinks of his art teacher. Page 218, 219. He has his chauffeur drive him down the road, and he sees her walking down the street. Okay? 219. He saw her give a sudden start. Her eyes dart around to appraise him, and the sleek black car parked behind. Okay, you're a commoner. You're walking down the street. I imagine, since I'm not black, I wouldn't know. But I imagine this is like being black walking in a quote-unquote white neighborhood. And a car slows down. But in that instance, it's not just a car. It's a cop car. Okay? What are you thinking? Stupid cop's going to, hassle me. She's thinking what? It's not a cop. It's a magician. This magician's going to hassle me for some reason. Might I have a word? Because, he's rolled the window down. She can see him. What do you want? Is that the response he was expecting? What do you think he was expecting? How long has it been since he's seen Mrs. Lutjens? 7, 8 years at least. Maybe 6, 7. What do you want? It's not Nathaniel or John, as she now knows he's called. She was very defensive. Goodness knows what she thought he was. Some official come to inquire about her taxes. Just a chat. I recognize you. I wondered if you recognized me. That's his way of saying, Mrs. Lutjens, it's me. It's Nathaniel, your former art student. Her face was pale, etched with worry, frowning. She says, I'm sorry, I don't. Oh, yes, I do. Nathaniel. I don't suppose I can use that name. He probably shouldn't. Okay, now think about that. She calls him Nathaniel. He's quote unquote out in public. What might he have hovering around him at his disposal, at his service? Demons, right? Because the magicians often have just demons with them. Not visible, but just kind of, on the call, ready. She's just revealed his birth name. Yes, she says. She stood looking at him, his suit, his shoes, his silver ring, mostly his face. Her scrutiny was deeper than he had expected, serious and intense. And I think what that means is he's uncomfortable. She's just given him the twice over. Not once over, twice over. Rather to his surprise, she did not smile. I was passing. I saw you. Well, it's been a long time. Yes. I thought, how are you? Hurry. I'm well. Do you have a name? Can I call you something? So what does that mean? She doesn't pay any attention to the news. She doesn't look at the leaflets that have been plastered all over the city that he's responsible for. John Mandrake, you may have heard of me. What does that mean? Everybody knows me. Oh, she says, yes, of course. I'm information minister. Have been for the last 2 years. You should have known who I was, is what he's saying. Quite a surprise. I was rather young, but Mr. Devereaux, here I am. Well, I thought you'd be pleased to see how well it's all turned out. What does that mean? How well what's all turned out? He's
issues with the Underwood family.
Okay.
And with Simon in the first book.
Yeah, but she didn't know. I mean, she saw what Simon Lovelace did and stuff. Does she know what's happened to the Underwoods? Was it in the papers? Probably not. Or if it was a gas explosion, kind of a thing. Okay? I think what he means is how well I've turned out. Looky here. You were my art teacher. Look at me now. You have some credit in that. After the last time we saw each other, because what was the last time? When he was beaten into unconsciousness. And she yelled, and she got fired. That was all very unfortunate. I was grateful for you. That's what I wanted to tell you. Grateful then, still am now. Grateful. What do you mean? Great. What did I do? Well, I never got a chance to. That was a long time ago. Under the water under the bridge there, John. So you're the information minister. You're the one responsible for those pamphlet things they're giving out at the stations. He goes, yes. And he smiles. That's me. The ones that tell us what a fine war we're waging and how only the best young men are signing up for it. That it's a man's job to sail off to America and fight for freedom and security. The ones that say that death is a fit price to pay for the survival of the empire. Yeah, that's me. Well, you've come a long way, Mr. Mandrake. Why? Because what kind of things did he used to talk to her about? What kind of questions did he have?
Just curiosity.
Wondering, curiosity, what else?
Stuff about the empire.
Stuff about the empire. He asked her, are all magicians good, etc. She was one of those who taught him things, told him things about being noble, being honorable, being responsible. I don't suppose, he says, you usually see your pupils again once they've grown up. She goes, no, my job's with the children, not the adults they become. You happy in your job? That is, are you doing well? Happy with your money, your status, all that? I could help you. I could find other employment. I have influence, could find you something better. There are strategists in the war ministry, who could use people with your expertise. Why? Because she's an expert painter. Okay? To design mass-produced pentacles for the American campaign. He says, technicians like you, we've created an advertising department to better put across our message to the people. Technicians like you would be welcomed. She says, by the people, I take it you mean commoners? Okay, notice what he's just said. We have a department, in my department, that's there to put the message across to the people. She goes, us, you mean? Yeah, that's what we're calling them now in public. The people. They seem to prefer it. They don't like being called commoners. In other words, they'd rather be called clay than mud. I see. Well, no, thank you. Quite as all right as I am. I'm sure none of the departments would want an old commoner like me thrust into their midst. And anyway, I still rather enjoy my job, but it's very kind of you all the same. She looks at her watch, which is always a sign of what? Gotta go. It's been fun talking. He realizes. He says, can I give you a lift? No, thank you. You're very kind. Well, very well, if that's the way you feel about it, he says. It's been a pleasure seeing you again. Please don't tell anybody what we talked about. And then she says, do you really think that I'll want to tell the world that I once saw you, the great John Mandrake, our beloved information minister, hanging upside down with your bottom in the air? That I heard your yelps and wails of pain as cruel men beat you? You think I'd tell this? That's really what you think? Because what kind of person would tell that? A person who thinks they have something over the person who was being beaten. Okay? She's saying, you think I'm that kind of person? The kind of person who would use some detail like that to get the upper hand? No. I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about my name. Don't. Oh, that. It may surprise you to know I've got better things to do with my time. Yes, even I, with my silly little unimportant job, don't have a great desire to betray the children I once worked with, no matter what they've become. Notice what she says there. To betray the children I worked with. Well, he's no longer a child, right? He's an adult. So would she be betraying the child or the adult? In her mind, the child. In her mind, he's not this. He's that innocent little child. Your birthday, Mr. Mandrake, is safe with me. Now I must go. I'm late for my work. You're misinterpreting everything I'm saying, he says. I didn't come here to crow over you. I just didn't get a chance back then to thank you. She says, no, I think I do understand. And I am pleased to know it. That is, thank you. But you mistake yourself. It was the boy who was grateful to me. Okay? The boy who was beaten unconscious. He was the one that was grateful to me. You're not. That is, the 17, 18-year-old John Mandrake, you're not grateful. And you are no longer that boy. You do not speak for him. We have nothing in common, you and I. Why did she say that? How does she mean he no longer speaks for that boy?
He's not the boy anymore because he became what she didn't want him to.
Yes. Why else? William Wordsworth has a poem that has a line in it that says, the boy is the father of the man. We tend to think it's the other way around. Right? That it's men who get women pregnant who then have boys, etc. Okay? How's the boy the father of the man? Because the man grows out of the boy. She's saying, you're not that boy anymore. You're not the one I taught art to. And her implication is, because if you came to my schoolroom now, I'd kick your sorry you-know-what out. Why? Because he can't be taught. She thinks. What does she think about him? You're an enemy. Why did I just spend 5 minutes on this section? I mean, in terms of the overall novel, think of, if you've gotten to the end, hopefully you have, we won't. I decided I'm going to add one more day. Whether we finish the Garth Nix series or not, we'll get as far as we can. But we do need to finish this one. So we'll spend Wednesday too. It's because of this interaction, I think, or it's at least partially because of this interaction, that Nathaniel does what?
It's back to before.
How so?
He goes back to Nathaniel.
How so? Keep going, you're right.
Well, when he flat out tells Kitty his name later on.
And does she ever call him after that John? No, she doesn't. Neither does Bartimaeus. Okay? What's that telling us? Who does he? Go ahead.
He's changed.
He's changed. So he, you go from the first novel and he grows and he changes and becomes John Mandrake and he becomes, second novel deputy to the internal affairs minister and he rises in power, etc. Third novel, he's now information minister, controlling all the propaganda, and then what does he do? He kind of goes back. And so you kind of have this circle, as it were. Okay? What else? Jamar, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say that he changed. She believes it's not for the better.
Right. She doesn't believe it's for the better. And maybe that's because at this point, he hasn't completely changed yet. It's going to take something else. Okay? So,
I was going to ask, you mentioned it. Do you think that what she says to him starts the change because of how much he trusted her when he was a child?
I think what started the change there was when he saw Bartimaeus as a frog, and he dismissed him.
yeah, I think that's true. Let's qualify the changing a little bit. That's qualifying the changing towards Bartimaeus, and I think towards all demons or Ginny. I think the change that you're talking about, Bill and Shelby and Jamari, I think that change starts to show up when he sees Nick Drew. And he sees that demon put into Nick Drew. And he says what? It's not right. It's just not right. I don't care what your purpose or goal is. This isn't right. Because Nick Drew has no what in that?
He has no power, no control.
He has no power, no control. He has no will. He has no say in that. It's totally different. If, like Devereaux or Makepeace, calls that demon into himself. That's their free will acting. It's not the demon outside saying, I'm going to do this to you. I'm making you. It's them. Okay? That's totally different. But to force someone, and Nick Drew's what? He's a commoner. He's not a magician. Okay? So I think, those two elements. The one is working on one aspect of Nathaniel's mindset, the beings from the other place. The other is working on the other side of his mindset, the other beings here. Okay? Because what has he thought of commoners? Really up until that point, except for Kitty. Kitty's the one soft spot in his armor. They're commoners. They don't count. They can be treated how we, in our wisdom, magicians, know they should be treated. Okay? So, go on a bit. Let's see here. Nathaniel talks to Bartimaeus and tells Bartimaeus, I know about Kitty Jones, page 229. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. He says he does. Okay. Talk about Hopkins and Jenkins and what happened to Bartimaeus. He got put by Hopkins / Quarrel into the thing. Okay. Next chapter, 18. Kitty talks with Mr. Button about the other place and summoning and such. And on 240, she says, what is the other place? What's it like? A region of chaos, a world of endless abominations. Now, bear in mind, Button is a magician. Okay? And he says, he quotes this one guy, a sump of madness. We cannot begin to imagine the horror of such a realm. It's enough to make a man want a third, give me more food. So magicians have visited it. He says, well, okay, so it hasn't been done. No, it's been tried. Okay? And he mentions Ficino, a real person in history, by the way. So she says, go on, keep going. Well, a few others have tried. Ptolemy is the only one who claimed to have succeeded. Left details in his Apocrypha, etc. He says, but it's ludicrous. It's ridiculous. And she's thinking, Ptolemy. By most accounts, he didn't live long afterward. Button goes on. Top of 241. Bartimaeus had emphasized exactly that. Ptolemy had been willing to put his trust in him. As a result, there was no limit to their bond. Kitty gazed up at the ceiling. And she remembered Bartimaeus' challenge. She hadn't done it. Why? Because there was no trust there. She didn't trust him. He didn't trust her. How do you gain trust? How do two people who are adversaries of sorts gain trust?
Put down your shields or shake.
Someone's got to do what?
Give up your defense.
Someone's got to become vulnerable to the other side. Okay. Ronald Reagan used to say, back during his presidency, trust but verify in terms of dealing with the Soviets. Yeah, I'll trust you, but what else am I going to do? I'm going to make sure you're holding to your side of the bargain. I'll trust you, but I got to have proof. Okay? That's kind of half lowering the shield. So she's thinking, how can I do this? So she walks on, and she just notices people. She looks and sees people's faces, top of 242. There's night police loitering arrogantly at major intersections. One or two roads barricaded off. There had been a disorder in central London. Now the authorities were cracking down. Cops everywhere, Her pace grew slower, her gaze dulled and unseen. She felt weighed down by the utter futility of things. 3 years she had been shut up in libraries, dusty rooms, playing at being a magician. And all for what? Nothing had changed. Nothing would change. A cloak of injustice lay upon London, and she, like everyone else, was smothered by it. The council, the magicians, did what they pleased, oblivious to the suffering they caused, and she was unable to do anything about it. What point is she reaching? She doesn't quite reach it. Utter despair. Despair comes from Latin, despace. It means no hope. No hope at all. Okay? So, she goes into her bar where she works. And who does she see? Well, there's John Mandrake, who shows up. Okay? They go out. She wants to know, are you here to kill me? He says, no. Nothing to do with that. I'm not here to do that. Okay? Are you arresting me? Well, it's not quite that. So I'm free to go. Page 248. Ms. Jones, he snarled, I'm here as a private individual, not as a member of the government, though if you don't stop your histrionics, that may change. Officially, you are dead. Yesterday, I received word that you were alive. I wanted confirmation. Notice, officially, you are dead. I'm not here as a member of the government. But now, as a member of the government, what would it be incumbent upon him to do? Report it. After all, she is a leader of the resistance. Okay? So, she goes on and just, launches into him. Why? Because she's still frustrated over the conversation with Bartimaeus, even though it's been a couple of days. She says, you enslaved the demons, top of 249. Not human slavery, just demons. Oh, that makes it better. I think not. Everything you do is tainted with corruption. That's not so. It is so, and I think you know it. Well, what effect did Mrs. Lutyens' conversation with him have? Made him a little uneasy about his job. I was told you saved me from the golem. You risked your life. I was also told you died doing it. Now that I find you alive, I'm curious as to the truth. What's the truth he's curious about? Did you really risk your life to save me? Think of one of your essay questions. Did you really sacrifice yourself for me? What do you want? The details? Yes, I did. I must have been mad. Yes, I did, and I'm sorry I did. That's what and I must have been mad means. Is she really? No. I stopped the golem from crushing your sorry head into a pulp. Then I ran away. That's all there is to it. Thanks. So now this is the second person he's had to say thanks to. I kind of wondered why. Could you answer that part for me? Because, okay, the other part, thanks, but why? Why would you do that? Would any other commoner? Would Nick Drew have saved Nathaniel? Would Pennyfeather? Would Stanley? No, he offered to kill him earlier, Would Fred? No. I think there's maybe one who would have. Eva. The one who wanted to destroy all the magical objects that they stole. I don't know. I really don't know. He says, put your coat on. You're getting wet. Like you care. Yeah, he does care. That's why he says it. Okay. So, she says, I did it without thinking. If you want to know the truth, I've regretted it ever since. Whenever I've seen your hideous lying leaflets on the streets or past those stages where your actors do your line for you, so don't thank me. If you're going to thank Bartimaeus, he's the one who put the idea in my head. What? I find that hard to credit. Why? Because he's a demon? Yeah, I know. Page 250. Doesn't make much sense, but he told me how to stop the golem. He called me back when I could have run. So notice, two things there. He told me how I could stop it, and when I started to run, he called me back. Without him, you'd be dead, but he's just a slave. Why does Bartimaeus regard you with affection? There's no affection. He says, oh, then why did he tell me you were dead? He said, I don't know. Maybe because I treated him with respect, because I didn't enslave him. Maybe I didn't seek to keep him in service for year after year without a break till his essence wore away. And he says, how do you know that? You haven't seen Bartimaeus for years. Have you? And what happens? Notice she doesn't get to answer that question. They get picked up and taken to the theater, where, we're going to skip a bunch now, all hell breaks loose. Okay? So, Bartimaeus is captured by Hopkins and put in the silver serving dish. I'm going to skip a bunch. In chapter 21, Nathaniel and Kitty are on their way to the theater, and we're told he looks out of the window of the limo, page 281. He sees the cars, the house, the lights go by in a blur. Massive color, movement, changed endlessly, beguilingly, and yet meant nothing. And then he sees his reflection, and he focuses on that. It was not a wholly reassuring sight. His face was etched with weariness, his hair damp, his collar limply sagging, but in his eyes a spark burns. Earlier that day it had not been so. Why? The day's just been crap. One crisis after another. Okay? The discovery of his earlier betrayal by Bartimaeus, that had hit him hard. His carefully constructed persona of John Mandrake, information minister, blithely assured member of the council, had begun to crack around him. Notice, his carefully constructed persona. What is a persona?
Character. Or
Keep going.
A part of you that you play for other people to see.
A part of you that you play for other people to see. For example, most, wild, over-the-top, heavy metal rock musicians. Back in his heyday, Alice Cooper. The guys in Kiss. That was an act. They weren't like that in everyday, ordinary life. Now, some of them were. Ozzy Osbourne, Motley Crue guys. Yeah, they were really like that in everyday life, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Comedians and such. As we all know, Robin Williams was not the drop-dead funny guy all the time. Someone who commits suicide, that's not them. He wasn't the genie all the time. Okay? So what's this persona he creates?
The magician that's in the government.
And it's covering what? Nathaniel. It's covering Nathaniel. And what's happening to the persona out here? It's starting to crack. It's like glass. You hit it hard enough, and you hit enough times, and like a windshield, it'll start to splinter and shatter. It doesn't just fall apart like dropping a light bulb shatters. So how did it start? It had been his rejection by Ms. Lutyens that morning that had dealt the decisive blow. It had started cracking before then when he got the summons to the council, etc., etc., and Ms. Lutyens comes, or he comes to her, and it's like she just barely taps it. In a few moments of sustained contempt, she had shattered the armor of his status and laid bare the boy beneath. She said, "It's not the boy that's grateful to me." And here we're told, yeah, it is. She sees the persona. She doesn't see through it. The shock had been almost too much for Nathaniel. With the loss of self-esteem came chaos. He had spent the rest of the day locked in his rooms, alternately raging, subsiding into silence. Okay? So, we're told, he's thinking about, the next day's trial and such. He's not even thinking about where he's going right now, just the trial. And we're told, at last, page 282, at last he was being decisive once again, playing for the highest stakes, shrugging off the inertia of the last few years. He felt almost as he had done as a child, thrilling in the audacity of his actions. That was how it had often been before politics and the stultifying role of John Mandrake had closed in on him, and he no longer wished to play that part. So if he's not going to play that part of John Mandrake, what's he going to do? If fate were kind, he would first ensure his political survival. Notice, if fate were kind. But he had long been tired of the other ministers, sickened by their moral corruption, by their self-preserving greed. So if he's sick by their moral corruption, then what does that say about him and a sense of morality? He at least still has one. It had taken until today, with the disdain in the eyes of Ms. Lutyens and Kitty Jones, to recognize that sickness in himself. What sickness? Self-preserving greed. Well, he would not sink back into the routines of the council. Decisive action was needed to save the country from their mismanagement. He peered through the window at the smudge outlines, etc., etc., and what's he thinking? It's got to be the staff of Gladstone. That's how I'm going to solve the problems. Devereaux said, no, nobody's going to take it or use it. Not that he should use force, of course, at least not on the commoners. So who will he use force against? His compatriots. Kitty Jones had been right about that. He glanced across to where, agreeably close to him, the girl sat. Notice that, agreeably close. There is an affection there. Okay? she'd been the second reason his energies were sparked. So they're taken into the theater, and he talks to Quentin and such, and Quentin says, oh, yes, your girlfriend too. And he's like, wait, she's not my girlfriend, you know. She's far prettier than you or I. And what happens? He leans over to Kitty. Quentin Makepeace, leans over to Kitty 286 and says, whispering kind of into her ear, what a pity your resistance is no longer active. A well-directed bomb here, that would decapitate the whole government. Just think, Miss Jones, what you could have achieved. All right? Actually, that is... that's Nathaniel saying that. It's not Makepeace, because Makepeace comes out. Okay? So, John puts on his lenses, and then Quentin comes up, asks, how's Miss Jones enjoying the show? He's like, well, how do you know who it is? He says, I know many things. And what does John witness? Who comes in the back of the theater? Imps, demons, genie, etc. And they start, from the back forward, start capturing magicians. What does John realize? What kind of coup? I mean, yeah, it's obviously a coup d'etat. Okay? Who's in charge? The fool. The fool playwright. The guy who writes Tripe turns out to be the mastermind. Okay? He turns, 294. He looks at Kitty. Their eyes meet. Her face showed confusion, doubt, disbelief. Nathaniel held her gaze. His mouth worked frantically, uttering silent pleas. His eyebrows attempted complicated supplications. If the knife could just be knocked away, just for an instant, he might leap on Makepeace. Quick, if she could only act now. While the madman was distant, she looked across. She looks at Nathaniel. Her brow furrows, and then he thinks it was no good. She wasn't going to help him. Why should she? She held him in contempt, and then she gives a slight nod. And what happens? She leaps. Okay. Bolt of energy smashes her. She falls to the floor. And top of 296. Makepeace says, nope, we stand at the dawn of a new age, and he looks back behind him, and there's the mercenary. The big muscular guy with the 7-league boots, etc. Okay? Part 4. Let's see here. Ptolemy and Bartimaeus talk about the other place. And essentially ends with Ptolemy saying, I will follow you. We'll set up a new era, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Let's skip a bunch. They go off to the ministry, 314, 315. Kitty puts 2 and 2 together. You were the benefactor. You were the one who set up Clem Hopkins. Hopkins told us to raid the tomb. You were the one behind all that. He says, very good. I wondered if you'd ever recall. Of course I knew you, top of 315, as soon as I saw you with Mandrake. That's why it amused me to invite you to my little show tonight. Okay? So he says, of course I knew about the monster in the tomb. In 316, he owns up going back to the first attempted rebellion or coup, the loveless one. Okay. He then talks about Duval, how he set him up to it, etc., etc. He said, now, no, what we're doing now is something totally different. 3:18. And this is what really set him on the goal for this book, okay? In the last book, what made, I'm trying to think how to put this. What event occurred that set up the idea in this book that we could get demons to inhabit our bodies? What escapes from Gladstone's tomb? Gladstone's bones. And what's in Gladstone's bones? Honorius, the Afrit. And he says, 3:18. We observed the demon inhabited Gladstone's bones. Not a mere guise. That is, it wasn't appearing like Gladstone's bones. Not an illusion of essence. The skeleton was real. The demon had mingled with the actual bones. I wonder if we could do that with a living body. Specifically, living body of a magician. Because if we could, what would that do? Cue the Robin Williams genie, ultimate power kind of a thing. Okay? Mandrake, the risks are far too great. The commoner in your workroom. He heard the demon talking his head. It would have been only because he did not have the will to suppress the demon. Why didn't he have the will? Because he was a commoner. A magician, however, should have the strength of will to be able to suppress the demon. Okay? So, Hopkins, there is what? It's Clem Hopkins and Quarrel. Okay? So, Nathaniel begs for Kitty. He says, genius, page 322 and following, genius make peace. I support it entirely. I'm gonna join with you. I'm gonna call a demon in me too and make peace. Says, okay, you can have the girl. She can be your little trophy or whatever. Okay. 323 at the bottom. Twice now that evening, Kitty Jones had nearly died, and all because of what he'd done. Because he'd found her, right? She wouldn't be there if he hadn't gone to the pub where she works. Because he'd wrenched her out of her quiet new life and brought her with him just to satisfy his selfish curiosity. Okay? That was the first time. He thought she was dead when she was hit by that green spell, but her resilience saved her. 324. Already, hold on. So he realizes she's alive. 324 at the top. Little by little, he began to realize his folly. Already in the last 2 days, he'd begun to detach himself from the name of Mandrake, from the role that for years had become a second skin. But again, it's a role. Notice how much throughout all three novels, the idea of acting, of play acting, of performance figures in, okay? But only with the events in the theater did that detachment become a true separation. In other words, no longer, it's in the theater, the place where actors put on characters, where Nathaniel casts off his character. In the real, Nathaniel is reborn, so to speak. The two key certainties that governed him, his belief in the invulnerability of the government and in the essential virtue of his motives, were dashed from him in a matter of moments. Okay, what are his two beliefs? The invulnerability of the government, which means what? It's all powerful. It cannot be toppled. Okay? If it were a vulnerability, then it could be toppled. Okay? And then what else? The virtue of his motives. What does that mean? He no longer sees himself as having this. He no longer sees his motives as having always been pure. So when he talks about other people's morality, what is he really doing? It's like when he's in that limo on his way to the theater and he sees his reflection. This is, I'm pretty sure I put this up here before when we were talking about Karen. This is the whole know thyself thing. This is his moment of contact with his deepest, most inner self. The magicians were overpowered. Kitty was struck down. Both came at the hand of Makepeace, and it was with horror that Nathaniel recognized in that callous, indifferent hand a reflection of his own. It's because of what Makepeace does that Nathaniel finally sees. He's just a greater version of me. And that's what makes him recoil. That's what makes him kind of metaphorically sick to his stomach. He doesn't like what he sees because he sees it clearly now for the first time. It was nothing but another cold, ambitious little man playing for power. No different from Lovelace or Duval. And at this thought, Nathaniel felt a chill upon his spine from Nathaniel's own musings that very evening. Because what was he thinking when he looked in that mirror? I've got to do something, and what's he going to do? He's going to get the staff, and he's going to make things right. Well, now, what does he realize? Even that idea has what at its root? Power. I will have the power. Oh, yes, he told himself it was for the right reasons. Now, how naked and obvious Nathaniel's ambition must have been. Makepeace had seen it. Farrar, too. Devereux had seen it. Ms. Lutchins had understood it and walked away. No wonder Kitty had treated him with such disdain. As he had watched over her body in the Hall of Statues, he had come to share her contempt. He hates himself at this point. He doesn't like what he sees. But then she wakes up. Why? Because what had he thought up until this point? She was dead. Okay? Yeah, I know. Previous page, she moved a little bit. She breathed. But now she's waking up. Okay? I'll get you out of this. Kitty, get up. I'll get you. How? He doesn't know how. But he says he'll get her out. Okay? So, Makepeace says he's going to call Nuda into him, or Nauda, however you pronounce it. 327, we find out. You don't want to go there. Nauda is probably more powerful than Ramuthra was in the first book. Okay? And we see him call it in. And we hear Nauda speak and such. Pages 329, 330 and following. Okay? John says he's going to call one into him, 332. So let's go to 333. I'm going to. Now we'll pick up with chapter 24, and then we'll finish this on Wednesday. I hope. We'll finish it on Wednesday. We have to.